All right, so I'm gonna read verse 17 to 30. I'm gonna read verse 17 to 30, and then I'm gonna open it up to see who anybody have any statements, and I'll make comments last. All right, 17 to 30. Does anybody want to read the last 7 verses, verse 31 to 37?
Nobody wants to read?
I'll go.
Thank you, JP. JP is gonna be the reading bully. All right. All right. You got the last 7. I'm gonna read verse 7 to 30, and then we're gonna talk about it. And then Donald's gonna read the last 7. All right. Verse 17, Mark chapter 7. And when he was entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. And he said unto them, Are you so without understanding too? Do you not understand whatsoever thing that enters, that thing from without enters into the man, it cannot defile him, because it enters not into his mind or heart, but into the belly, and goes into the draught, purging all food. Now notice it says meats. When the scripture says meats, that word means food, not like flesh. When it says flesh, it's talking about meat, like animal meat. When it says flesh. When it says meats, it's talking about food. And then it says in verse 20, and he said, that which comes out of the man, that defiles a man. Because from within, out of the mind of men, proceed evil thoughts. That's how you connect the heart and the mind. It says, out of the heart of man proceed evil thoughts. That's how we know the heart is the mind. Out of the heart of man proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these things come from within and defile the man. And from thence he rose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon, and entered into the house, and would have no man know it, and wouldn't have anybody know that he did that, but he could not be hidden. He didn't want anybody to know, but he could not be hidden. Verse 25. A certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by nation. He besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Yahusha said unto her, let the children first be filled, because it is not acceptable to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. She answered and said to him, yes, master, but the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And he said to her, because this saying, go your way, the devil is gone out of your daughter. And when she came home to her house, she found the devil gone out and the daughter laid upon the bed. All right, I'm going to open this up. Hands. Any hands? All right. I'm going to start talking. All right, here we go. So he breaks down the defilement. Oh, Sister Linda, go ahead. Go ahead, sister.
Okay, shalom, everyone. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I just wanted to give a couple of cross-reference verses pertaining to what you just read. Jeremiah 17, 9 and 10. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, Yahuah, search the heart. I try the reins, which is the mind, the inner self, even to give every man according to the fruit of his doings. Proverbs 16:2 tells us, all of a man's ways are pure in his own eyes, but Yah weighs the spirits. Proverbs 21:2, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but Yahuah ponders the hearts. And the last one, Proverbs 30:12, there's a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. So we sometimes find ourselves spending a lot of time trying to do things right on the outside. But while we're doing things on the outside, our Father's looking at our hearts, and he's pondering our motives and all of these other things. And this is what he's either approving or disapproving us by. So as you were saying earlier, it really behooves us to take authority, take control over our thoughts, our motives, and all those things that people cannot see, because those are the areas of our lives that truly need to be purified. Praise Yah.
No, praise Yah. Praise Yah. Thank
Praise
you,
Yah for
sister.
that
That's
one.
exactly. You need to know those things. It's the mind that he knows. And here's the thing. We know our mind as well. So we can't try to fool Yah with like an outward demonstration. We have to recognize that Yah knows what's inside. So even if an outward demonstration looks good, you can still be condemned. You see, so when we're looking at what he's talking about as far as Eden, we know that the context already is not talking about actual meat. But even if you incorporate that, if Yah commands you to do something, the fruit that comes out is not only what you say, it's also what you do. So it's not the fact that they ate pig that's defiling them. It's the fact that they went to go against Yah's word to eat pig. That's different than just a person eating pig. Let's say a person, there's many people I know have come into the walk eating pig, or Yah approached them eating pig, you know, and as they learn, they stop. Matter of fact, when you look at Acts 15, he didn't even say, hey, tell them, make sure they don't eat none of the unclean animals, make sure they eat the clean ones instead. None of that was said. What was said was, make sure you don't drink the blood, make sure you don't eat things strangled, no, make sure you don't eat things offered to idols. The rest, they will learn. Many times we want to like rush people learning certain things where they're not even defiled. Matter of fact, they're coming out of the error. They're coming out of defilement because, like what Sister Linda read, because the heart or the mind is now dedicated towards following Yah, following his word. The moment they read the truth, they're going to accept it because their minds has already been dedicated to Yah. You see, but when we're looking we're from the outside, we just see a person eating a ham sandwich, and we're like, oh man, that's evil. You know what I mean? It's evil because of the intent of the heart. If a person doesn't know, Scripture says in Acts 17, Yah winks at your ignorance, but he calls you to repent. So when you do it out of ignorance, he's going to wink at your ignorance, but he's going to make sure he shows you the truth as well. You know what I mean? So we need to have that mindset. Looking at evil works being done, or looking at something that's directly against a commandment, not necessarily defiling that person if that person doesn't know. So we can't look at in the nations and say, look at this look at these common people, when the Messiah died for the world, and now he's giving them an opportunity to hear the truth. You know, when you read Acts chapter 10 and 11, that's the lesson that Peter had to have. He had to understand that the nations wasn't unclean of themselves, that they had to intentionally go against what they knew in order to be unclean. And this is what he's saying here. Verse 19 and 20, it says, because it enters not into the mind. So whatever you eat, if you eat pork, it's not going in your mind. If you don't know that is wrong, when you eat pork, it's not going into your mind. but it's going into your belly and it's going into the draught, purging all food, all food. And it says, and he said, that which comes out of the man, that defiles the man. Verse 21, because from within, out of the mind of men proceed evil thoughts, and then it continues. So we need to recognize that the root of the problem is the mind or the heart of man. That's the root of the problem. Yah is concerned with the root of the problem. We ought to be concerned with the root of the problem. Stop looking at the outward appearance. Like Yah told Samuel, many people read that verse in the book of Samuel, and it says, man looks at the outward appearance, but Yah judges the heart. Yah was actually rebuking Samuel. He wasn't saying that that's how you're supposed to do things. He was rebuking Samuel because Samuel was crying because Saul turned away from Yah. And Samuel was crying because the way that Saul looked, he was strong, he was head and shoulders above every Israelite, and he was the king. So he was crying because he felt like there was no hope, because he was only looking at the outward appearance, and he saw that no one else looked like him physically. So Yah told him, stop judging the outward appearance. Even when Samuel went to go choose a king, when he found David, he kept looking at every one of Jesse's sons and saying, oh, this has to be him right here. Until he found out that the smallest one was the one anointed to be king. So we need to recognize that Yah looks at the intent. We can't look at the intent directly, but we can also wait for the fruit. Just because we see something doesn't necessarily mean we have to judge it right away. We have to do not judge things before the time. We have to wait to see if that's a fruit or if that's a person with good intentions but has no knowledge about what he ought to do. You know what I mean? So this is amazing for us to start reflecting on not only our own intention, but also recognize that we have to judge the fruit of another person based off of the intention. So even if you see somebody doing something wrong, ask them, why are you doing that? You can hear the reason why, whether it's a wicked reason or whether it's an ignorant reason. And then it gives you opportunity to either rebuke the person or instruct the person, edify the person. We just need to be more interactive. Don't judge stuff from far away without asking a question. Don't come up with an idea like, oh, this person is doing this, and you didn't even ask the person. Wait until you ask the person to see the intent before you judge the person based off of your human perception. Ameka, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, regarding this, saying, we have to understand that Yahusha speaks in metaphors. For instance, you have the time when he's at the well with the woman, and he tells her, he asks her for some water, and then she starts talking about how it's not, lawful or a custom that, the Yahudim should be asking a Samaritan for water because they don't have any, any doings with them. And then he tells her, if you knew who it was asking you for water, you would have asked him for water, and he would have given it. And then he goes on to say, the water that I give you shall spring up, into everlasting. You shall not thirst again, drinking the water that I shall give you. And so, and it should spring up into a well, And so, when you think about it, he's not literally about to give an individual a glass of water. He's speaking about spiritual terms, spiritual things. So the same thing with this saying here. He's speaking spiritually. He's not just saying, it's not about the food that you eat. He's not literally saying that, even though in some part of the section he is explaining that the food that you do put in you does get purged out, but he's also speaking about the spiritual sense. And that's what a lot of people got to understand, is that not everything he said was just literal. He was speaking spiritual things, and so we got to keep that in mind when we're reading And we got to try to discern those things, because that will help you realize, okay, he's not speaking about just swine, because we know that, that's an unclean, it's an unclean thing to eat. It's an unclean thing for us to eat, but he's speaking spiritually. So, I hope that helps, clarify, bring some clarification.
Absolutely. There's many statements that he says in metaphors and stories to emphasize on great points. That many people think are real stories. So we need to kind of divert that and make sure that we're emphasizing, hey, this is not talking about like physical, actual things. This is talking about something is trying to bring, Messiah is trying to bring out a lesson that we need to apply to our thinking. It's very important where the mind is. The mind controls everything. That's where the Ruach is. When it says the spirit will go into your heart, or the Messiah comes into your heart, the heart is the mind. The spirit is in the mind. So when Yah speaks, we move. We move based off of what he allows us to understand. That's how he moves us, from the mind. But all right. So after that, he starts discussing. He starts traveling to Tyre and to Sidon. Tyre and Sidon are actually areas in Babylon. They're like on the border. Well, it says it here. They were on the border of Tyre and Sidon, and then a woman came, and it says the woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by nation. Everybody could look up Syro-Phoenician. It is verse 26. Verse 26. Syro-Phoenician by nation. Interesting thing.
I got it.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, JP.
No, I just looked it up. I was excited to say what it was. It just says mixed nation, half Phoenicians and half Syrians.
What in the world?
But when I looked at it, I was like, it reminded me of some of these arguments of today. But we see the Messiah, he comes and, well, first of all, it says the woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by nation. So it gives you both sides to who she was. For myself, I live in America, so I'm an American by, where I live. But that's not, who I am as a culturally speaking. So
right.
It gives you both sides to this. So, it's an interesting situation when it comes to some of the arguments of today, of who and what and who saved and things like that. So, but
right. Syria, absolutely. When you look in the scripture, in the Hebrew scriptures, you'll see that Syria is actually, when you look up Syria in the Old Testament, it's actually Aram or Aramean. Aramean is actually one of the sons of Seth. So Syria is the line of, they call it Syria, but it's really Aram. It's where Abraham's lineage lived. It's where he's from. He spoke Phoenician. Abraham spoke Phoenician. So when you look at certain words, they actually trace before the word, the Hebrew language kind of was. You can't really say it's Hebrew because there was a person named Hebrew. There was a person named Hebrew. So when you go before that, you have where the language was. The language was Phoenician, and then Eber came after. So when you have Syro-Phoenician, it's talking about around the area where Laban lived. The area where Laban lived, where Abraham sent his son to go find a wife for. He sent the servant to go find a wife for Isaac, and then Isaac sent Jacob over there to go find the wife in the same area. That's actually, they called him a Syrian or Aramean Phoenician was the area of Mesopotamia or Babylon before it was called Babylon. So he's in the land of he's around the land of where Abraham's descendants are. Sorry, not he, she. So she heard about him. In verse 25, it says, a certain woman whose young daughter was unclean heard about him and came and fell at his feet. So it tells you where she's from to tell you like where she came from. So she came from this place. She heard about him over there. And then she came to him and fell down at his feet. So it's just showing how, the nations all around is hearing about Messiah. This is crazy. Because a lot of times we have the kind of like this zeroed in view on Jerusalem, and we're like, yeah, he was just there. But in actuality, he was known many places before the disciples was preaching. That's why when the disciples started preaching, a lot of times it was easily received because they already heard about Messiah. You know what I mean? So I just think that was interesting. Another aspect that Emeka brought out was the fact that he's talking spiritually, even though he's using metaphors. So when you're over here looking at verse 28, many people, which I don't believe that he's calling the woman a dog. I think many people say he's calling the woman a dog. Does anybody have a view of what that may be saying? Verse 27 to 29. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to open it, see who wants to say anything. It says, Yahusha said to her, let the children first be filled, for it is not acceptable to take the children's bread and cast it unto the dogs. And she said to him, yes, master, yet the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. He said to her, for this saying, go your way, the devil is going out of your daughter. Who wants to take a crack at it? Anybody?
I was thinking like somewhere, I want to look it up to be honest, but I feel like I've heard that it was like more like a historical, I don't know, something with history, like where they called dogs compared to the to the Hebrew people. Did they look at them like dogs, like scavengers? I don't know. Those are just some of the thoughts that I was running with right now, like, because I know like off on another tangent, it was I know I've seen where it said fox. I think something about fox in the scriptures, and it was pertaining to one of the kings at the time. They called them something fox, so just throwing this out there, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you though. So I just give it a crack.
No, I heard a few historical views of the word dog. Some people said that she was from the lineage of Caleb, and the word, Caleb's name actually means dog. But I don't really see that correlating here in this statement, to Caleb. But no, okay, that's interesting. Emeka, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Well, I think he's, basically he's just speaking on, like we talked earlier, it's a metaphor. What he's saying is, those that, just like a dog, when you get done eating, whatever you got left over, then you give it to your dog. Then you give it to the dog. He takes basically what's left behind, and not in a bad way, but he still receives it as a gift. Like your dog is still like, yo, I can't, like he's sitting there waiting like for the scraps. You know what I'm saying? He's sitting there waiting for what he knows is his. And so when you're looking at this this situation or this metaphor, what he's saying is, but you're a Gentile. Not that you're a dog, but you're a Gentile. It's not polite for me to be out here when I came for the lost sheep of Israel to now give what is supposed to be to them to you, to come to show them the way or salvation or bring them healing when I came to heal them, but I came to heal you. But you being a Gentile, you wait your turn. Your healing will come. You know, it will come. You just have to wait your turn. You just have to wait for your time. And then just like you look at a dog, when he does finally get those scraps, they receive it with gladness, right? So even the Gentiles, once it was their turn, they still receive it with gladness, even though it went to the Yahudim and the Israelites first. When it came time for the Gentiles, just as it was spoken, when Paul's talking about how, those that Yahusha came for in the gospel that was preached, how the Yahudim rejected it, and then he says, and now it is for the Gentiles as well, and those that receive it with gladness. So it's the same thing here. It's like, your turn is gonna come, and when that comes, you can receive it with gladness. But because of her saying, she was like, yo, I'm glad I'm sitting here waiting. Like, I'm sitting here waiting for whatever you got to offer. Whatever you got to offer, I'll take it. And so he was like, yo, like, she understands her position. She understands, she understands the order of things, and she still accepts it. She believes in it, and she knows that it's coming. And because of her faith and knowing that it was going to come regardless, he was like, let me provide it to you now. So just the fact that Gentiles have to wait their turn before the good news could be spread, that, everything was open, to them as well, the, salvation, and the good news was open to them as well. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Right. One aspect. Let me clarify. He didn't mention anything about crumbs. He didn't say that they were gonna get crumbs. Gentiles don't get crumbs or leftovers. They get the same bread. It's just when you're delivering, even when you're delivering your portions, like your firstborn gets the first portion, and then you give it to others on the same table. It doesn't mean that they get the scraps, but the first portion goes to the firstborn. We know Israel is called the firstborn. We know that, right? I hope we know that. So in Exodus, Israel is referred to as the firstborn. So we know that the firstborn always gets filled, gets the first portion. Now, he never said that the Gentiles was going to get crumbs, but he emphasized on a parable, like you said, on a dog. I think you mentioned the pig earlier with the jewel in the snout. It's the same aspect. When he says that a pig goes back to his vomit, a dog goes back to his vomit, he used that terminology, saying that a dog goes. I see hands up. Let me let other people go first. Let me let Brian go first. I don't wanna say what I'm gonna say before everybody goes. Go ahead, Brian. But that was good recognition. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh yeah, I was just talking about like when like looking in the scriptures, like whenever I remember hearing the word dog, and one of them is in Isaiah 56:10-12, and it says, "His watchmen are blind; they are all ignorant; they are all dumb dogs. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. Yea, they are greedy dogs." Which can never have enough, and they are shepherds. They cannot understand. They all look to their own way, everyone for his gain from his quarter, and it goes on from there. But this describing what the dogs, the characteristic of the dogs, is just like something that's the dog is just he's lawless, going his own thing, and greedy and things, and these are just described as the shepherds of the watchmen of Israel. And I think it goes nicely with this chapter because he's referring to, you can describe the Pharisees in this way. This is like describing them to the T according to with Yahusha. So you can it's more like what Ameka was saying. I think it's more of a spiritual thing than anything else. It's like you can be a dog and be physically Israelite, but it's like where's your heart? Is it unbelieving or believing, and things like that?
Right.
And this woman here, she was exhibiting more characteristics of a believer than a dog, and so I believe that's why, in my opinion, that's why Yahusha, seeing her faith, healed her child and stuff. So yeah, so that's what I was seeing there. So.
I like that verse. I like that verse. You're bringing out a point that I wanted to make that you already said. And Ameka already said that the spiritual aspect of a dog does not apply to Gentiles. It applies to people who are not believers. If you look at verse 27, he doesn't say Israel or Jews. He says the children. He says, let the children first be filled. He's not saying Israel, because there's a lot of dogs in Israel as well. Like you said. Matter of fact, I believe Isaiah is probably talking. Isaiah is talking about Israelites. He's talking specifically about Israelites. So we're gonna touch on that. That was an excellent verse, Brian. Let me let Martha go. Go ahead, Sister Martha.
Hi, Shalom, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Okay. On the verse that you said, when he said, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. I think it was more of, and then when she responded, it was more of her humbling herself and associating herself more towards the dogs, because she responded and said, and she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. And she needed something from him. So to me, that was more of like a humbling. She had faith, but she humbled herself towards him by responding like that. So when he saw her response, that's when he said to her, for this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter. So I think she humbled herself in a way, and he saw that. He saw her heart, he saw the faith, and he just responded in that sense.
You're absolutely right pertaining to the woman's response. She humbled herself. He was testing her, and he humbled herself and placed herself as a dog. She brought herself low, just like how Paul calls himself the chiefest of sinners, and he also calls himself the least of the apostles. You have her putting herself in the aspect of a dog, even though Messiah was referencing a spiritual understanding.
Exactly.
So you're absolutely correct on her response, and that's why he said in verse 29, because of this saying, because you said this. You see, he didn't make her do that. He didn't make her say anything. He was testing her, and because she said the statement of humility, he said, you're gonna get a blessing. You know, in another area of the Gospels of the Good News, it says that he made a statement saying that he was amazed, and he did not see this faith in all of Israel. So in other areas of the gospel, it gives you a more broader view of how the Messiah felt about what she was saying, you know, that she was humbling herself. But let me let JP go first. But that's an excellent point that you brought up, Martha. Thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of, as I was looking through, different cross references and things, and then I went to the Matthew account of the same, of this, and there's not really too much difference, I guess, but one of the cross references that took me to was Acts chapter 10, verse 12, speaking about Peter's vision, and how in Acts chapter 10, verse 12, it says, in which were all kinds of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping creatures, and the birds of the heaven. But I mean, just that section, we know that those were unclean animals. And then, Peter, of course, he gets the understanding through that chapter. But it kind of makes me kind of think, like, as I read this before, I think I mentioned it within our Marco Polo, is that, you know, because most of the time it's like people kind of say like, well, it like the gate or the veil or the Gentiles were able to come in the book of Acts, as in like throughout the scriptures. It wasn't until then that they were able to receive the promise, I guess you would say. But it seems like here, like Messiah, I feel like reveals that in this exact portion, is that how that same promise that was for the Israelites is for the Gentiles as well. So that's the only way I can correlate the dogs to Gentiles, if it's looked at like that in my mind. You know what I'm saying? That's about it. Shalom.
Absolutely, JP. I was actually going to bring that up too. It's not like, hey, this is an opening for you. The problem was that Israel lost it. They didn't have it. That's why he kept saying, I don't see no faith in Israel. They didn't have nothing. Just like the Gentiles didn't have nothing. So it wasn't like, hey, they're my people first, then I'm going to give it to you. He was fulfilling the covenant he had with Abraham. I'm going to go to your children. Then he will open it to everyone else. Not because that's the way it's supposed to be, but because he made that promise to Abraham already. Because Israel lost everything. Go ahead, Sister Lynn.
Yes, another 2 verses that verify what you guys are saying. Revelations 22:14-15. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie.
Absolutely. Outside are the dogs. So now the characteristic of a dog that Brian brought up is that they're greedy. It says that they're greedy. Every time he mentions an animal, it's like what Emeka said. It's a spiritual application to the character. Messiah was testing the character of this woman. Because if you look at the other gospels, there was many times where people will come to him and he said, you're coming to me did you come to me to hear my words, or do you come to me to eat bread or to eat fish? So he's testing the motive of the woman. And I think that in our Mark study last week or the week before, we saw that there's times in which Messiah didn't know what Yahuwah was doing. There was certain moments where, like the woman that touched the hem of his garment, he didn't know. He was like, wait, who did this? So when we're looking at his conversations, we think that he's just reading every single person's mind. Like he's just reading everybody's mind instead of testing them. So here he's saying to cast it to the dogs. What does a dog do? A dog actually goes to everybody that gives it food. It's greedy. It goes to everybody. I remember walking down the street in Brooklyn, big, huge pit bull, growling at everybody. That's what it was known for. I gave him food. It never left my side. It wouldn't even go to its own master. I mean, it did go to his master, but it was as if I was his master now. You know what I mean? So there's a characteristic that the scriptures show of these animals. And that was an excellent verse that Brian brought up about how the animal is greedy, is not satisfied. The dog specifically is greedy, is not satisfied. So he was saying, should I take it away from the children and give it to you so you can now go somewhere else? Just like he said, shall I take the pearls and give it to the pigs so they could trample under it, underfoot? So he's looking at the characteristics. He mentioned a dog because he's mentioning the fact that dogs don't really care about receiving as long as they receive. And that's where Emeka brought up, she's like, yeah, the dogs is under the table waiting. So she compares herself now to with a different characteristic. Like I'm a wait under the table and eat whatever falls down. You see what I'm saying? Messiah wasn't saying, hey, that's what you deserve because you're a Gentile. hey, you're going to get crumbs. Absolutely not. The scripture says that the children will be fed first. What does scripture reveal as the children? The children incorporates Gentiles. When you look at Isaiah 56, it talks about how the stranger or the foreigner and the eunuch, if they come into the covenant and keep his Shabbat, that they will receive a name better than sons and daughters. You see what I'm saying? They come in and they become the children. When you look at Romans 8 verse 14, it says, he who is led by the Ruach are the children of Elohim. Well, I believe that's Romans 8:14, but it's Romans 8. It talks about how those who have the Ruach are the children. John chapter 8, Messiah says that they were children of Abraham, but then he said that they were children of the devil. And that if they were children of Abraham, they would do the works of Abraham. This is John chapter 8. So we see that when we're looking at Messiah's statements, you have to be very careful to just apply it to like whatever you think it is. Because like Omeka said, it is a spiritual connotation. Let the children first be filled. Those who are led by my spirit, those who have submitted to me, those who are coming to me, let them receive it first. You see what I'm saying? Those who come to me will be filled. Those are the ones. Now, it wasn't specific on, yes, he was going to go to the Jews first and then go to the Gentiles because none of them had faith. But it wasn't because he had to go to them first and then whatever is left, everyone else gets. What he wanted to do is emphasize that if you submit, you're my children and that's what you receive. And I'm not going to take it from those who want it to give it to those who's just greedy and just want something to, want like a piece of it or want to just trample upon it. So there was many aspects of animals that the Messiah used to show that should I give the truth and just cast it before swine? Remember he said, shall I take the pearls and cast it before swine so it could be trampled under their feet? He was talking about the characteristics of the animal. So when he's here saying that should I take the bread and give it to the dogs, which Brian mentioned that verse, excellent verse, that they're greedy. He didn't want to he wanted to test the motive of the woman to see if the woman was humble and submitted herself to the receiving of whatever Yah wanted to give her. And she showed in her words that she definitely was. Not only her words, but probably her demonstration. She probably waited there. She probably wanted to talk to Messiah. She probably waited till like a cold crowd passed through and then she was probably persistent. And Messiah gave a parable about those who are persistent, that those who are persistent, that the Father will bless them. You know what I mean? And he wasn't talking about any specific individuals like Israelites or Jews or Yahudim or Gentiles. He was talking about everyone. Those who are persistent will be blessed, period. Here, the children will eat first, period. Not Israelites, the children, because there was a lot of Israelites that didn't even eat when Messiah was there. The spiritual bread, because they rejected it. There was a lot of Gentiles when Messiah was here that actually received it. At the same time, while Messiah was here. So if the idea of this is restricted to the Yahudim first, how come we see Roman centurions receiving? How come we see this Syro-Phoenician woman receiving? You know what I mean? Because it's not, okay, you come first, then I get it. There's a certain specific, I'm coming to you to deliver this to you, and my people will take it everywhere else. That's the way that he set it up from the beginning. So all Messiah is doing is reestablishing the same thing that he initially wanted to do in the book of Exodus. I'm going to pull you out of Egypt, and then you're going to give the light to the nation. So what he was doing was, everybody who wants the light, I'm going to give it to them, and then they're going to give it to the nation. He's not changing the method. He's using the same method. It's not that I got to go to the Jews first and forget the Gentiles. They're going to get crumbs. I know Emeka wasn't saying that at all. Emeka was saying that they receive it after the Jews. But JP brought out a very good point, which our book of Isaiah speaks about. Gentiles was receiving from the very beginning. Gentiles was supposed to receive from the very beginning.
JP. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You got low though. But I just want to bring up the point that as I was looking between Matthew and the next book, or the book we're in, Mark, some of the things that I've highlighted that were different is in the book of Matthew, it calls the woman of Canaan. Another thing that happened was she calls him thou son of David. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. No, yeah, definitely. That aspect of recognition, like that's why it says in verse in Mark 7, it says in verse 25 that she heard of him.
Yeah.
She heard of him. She knew who he was. She knew he was the son of David. She knew he was from the Yahudim. She knew that.
Right.
You know? So she probably knew everything about him, that he was the Messiah, that he was doing these things. He was healing, you know.
And then in 23 of Matthew 15, the first thing that happens is he answered her not a word. And then the disciples came and besought him, saying, "Send her away, for she cried after us." But he answered and said, "I am not sent unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So I seen that as if I put them together, you know what I'm saying? If we put them together, you see like that a layer of the woman getting like, her faith to me even gets stronger.
Ignored.
Yeah, like she gets ignored even harder, and it's like, whoa, like her faith is that much greater. Yeah. So, and then the last portion, or the thing I would say, is that, you know, we see that in verse 25 it says, "And came and fell at his feet." And we had talked about the word worship before, but you know, in the Matthew 15:25 it says, "Then came she and worshipped him." And so if we correlate them, we see what the truth is behind what she's doing when she's worshiping him, is that she's falling at his feet, you know, as he's the king, you know. So, well, I see him as a king, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Praise Yahweh.
Praise God. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. That's funny, because that's exactly what Emeka said about verse 28, where she's like, I'm a wait. I'll wait under the table and get whatever's. And you see that in her character. She came to him and he didn't say anything to her. So imagine like how many people was coming, like just cutting in front of her and coming, and he was testing her specifically. Let me see if she really wants this. You know what I mean? There was a test that they were given about. It was like some type of ministry, and they were doing a test to see if they should hire this specific teacher, this Bible teacher, right? This was a pretty good test. So what they did was they had people come in for an interview to receive the job for a Bible teacher. And what they did was they just waited till the last one was there. So there was like 10 dudes in there waiting for the interview. Hours passed, little by little. Some of them left. Last person that was there, he says, the person for this Bible class needs to have patience. And you demonstrated the most patience, and he got the job. You know, so this is what I see here. Like, this woman is coming. Messiah sees the intent. He heard her, but he wanted to test her intent. He said, let me see if your mind is dedicated to this. You see what I'm saying? If you truly believe that I'm here to give, let me see if you truly believe so. And he waited until, and then she humbled herself, saying, it don't matter. I'm going to wait till it falls off the table and eat the crumbs. You see what I'm saying? This is what she's saying. She said, yet the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Like, I'm going to wait till it comes off of them then. If I can't get it, I know that you can give it. But if I'm going to wait and I'll take whatever comes off of them. You see what I'm saying? So I think that this is just another humble aspect to to how Yah wants us to approach him and what type of characteristics allows us to receive abundantly from him. I think everybody kind of gave a different angle of, a correct view with a different angle. But I think a lot of times we read past this particular story so fast, we don't gain the actual characteristics that she's demonstrated, so we could also demonstrate that same characteristic. Wait on Yah. The scriptures talk a lot about waiting on Yah, waiting on him. Be still, right? Be still. No, wait. But we continuously move. We continuously lose patience, like he's not giving me the bread right now. No, wait, and he will give it to you. You know what I mean? So, praise Yah for everybody's statements. A lot of you guys' statements actually helped me see this actually more clearly. Yeah, amazing, JP. This is kind of like how you're supposed to read the gospel. You connect them all together, see a bigger, broader picture. You can actually picture it in your mind. Instead of watching a movie, you could have the movie in your own mind. But praise Yah for that. All right, Brother Dom, wake your behind up. Is he gone?
Yeah.
The last 7 verses by Dom and Brina. Go ahead, Drina.
He just called us Drina.
Yeah. And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came unto the sea of Galilee.
Hold on one second. Where you at?
31.
Oh, yeah. I'm wrong. You're right. Go ahead.
Come on, man. And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came unto the sea of Galilee through the midst of the coast of Decapolis. And they bring unto him one that was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. And they beseech him to put his hand upon him. And he took him aside from the multitude and put his fingers into his ears. And he spit and touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and saith unto him, Ephphatha, and that is, be open. And straightway his ears were opened, and the string of his tongue was loosed. And he spake plain, and he charged them that they should tell no man. But the more he charged them, so much the more a great deal they published it, and were beyond measure astonished, saying, he hath done all things well. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak.
All right, brother. What stands out to you?
I mean, other than the miracle he just did, I ain't really got nothing right now.
Nah, all right. That's cool. No, it's not cool, but still, it's all right. All right. Anybody else have anything in the last 7 verses? JP came running, so he probably has some trying to be polite. Don't want nobody else to feel like he's doing too much. Go ahead, JP. Don't matter who's around.
No, I just I would just love this part because he says, and he charged them that they should tell no man. But the more he charged them, so much the more a great deal they published it. And we're beyond measure astonished, saying he had done all things well. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. I just always love that because it's just this excitement that they couldn't contain it. They're just like, I know he says, not to tell, but just that excitement. It makes me excited for them just reading it. You know what I mean? I just thought I just wanted to say that. It's just amazing when I read that.
They still disobeyed though. No. I get what you're saying though. I get what you're saying. There must be a reason why he's saying not to. You know, I know that a lot of times. I think we talked about this with the Book of Acts. Man, they both like really connect. And when you look at Messiah's life and you look at the disciples' life, like they both experience similar things. You know, where they're trying to say things that is not really. That's not what they're trying to expose right now. What they're doing is trying to reveal Yah and His word and His power. But instead, they're making this person famous when Messiah wasn't trying to become famous. It's just like when Messiah, he went up and there was a certain part where he closed himself in a place because the people outside was going to force him to become king. You know what I mean? So Messiah knew that these people was just trying to make him popular, and he wasn't trying to just be popular. When you look at Philippians 2, it says he made himself of no reputation, but then you see now he's trying to tell them don't don't tell nobody, and it's like they're expanding his reputation. So I think that the less that they did that, the more he was able to move around. But the more they did that, the less he was able to move around. And likewise with the disciples, So I think that's why they continuously made more disciples, because of that type of mindset. They elevate you, so the people that's elevated should kind of fall back and allow other people that's doing the same thing to go out, rather than them always taking the forefront. You don't see Peter every single place in the book of Acts. But yeah, no, I understand the excitement. I don't know how they would be able to contain those things. I don't know, but he said it, so I don't know how they would not tell nobody. But yeah, Sister Linda, I see Sister Martha's
Yes,
hand went down. I'm coming to you.
yes, Elder Jael and all the rest of you in the assembly of my beloved brothers and sisters. When I was preparing for this lesson tonight before the class, I did learn something. I learned something from from Mark 7 and 34, where it says, "And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said unto him, Ephphatha," that is, be open. All these years that I've been reading the scripture, I thought that when it was said Ephphatha, that it was saying it in Hebrew, that they had left the Hebrew word in the scripture. But I found out tonight that this is because when I started, because I am trying to study a little bit of Hebrew just to get a basic concept. And I did know that the word for open was one of my vocabulary words, one of the verbs for my vocabulary. And so I did research, and I found out that this is a Greek word. This is not a Hebrew word. It's a Greek form of it's the Greek form of an Aramaic word, but it's the Greek form of it. So I learned something tonight, because all this time I thought this was the actual Hebrew word. Before I had any concept of Hebrew, I thought this was the Hebrew word, that a Hebrew word that they had left in there, because we were told that they did leave a couple of the original Hebrew words in the New Testament. And so it got me looking at some of the other stuff, and I'm going to do some further research on that also. It opened up a whole new interest for me. Praise Yah.
No, praise Yah. Praise Yah. Yeah, no, it definitely is a Aramaic term. It has an Aramaic origin, and of course they have a Hebrew similarity. They have petak. Petak means to open. Ephphatha is a lot of times they would translate certain words, like there was Greek words for be open.
Right.
Just like earlier in verse 6 where it says Isaias. That's not really what it is. It's really
right.
Isaiah or Yeshua.
Exactly.
So there's certain words that are ancient words. They're ancient words, and he spoke those ancient words. It says it's Chaldean.
Yeah, when I looked it up, it said it's the Greek form of Syro Chaldean or Aramaic word. The Greek form, so the Greek transliteration of what it normally what it would have been.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because remember, from all the way up here, he was on the border of Tyre and Sidon, and that Syro-Phoenician person came to him, which was Greek. And then now down here, he left the coast and went to Galilee, which is another Greek area, to the coast of Decapolis, which is another Greek area.
Right.
He's speaking. Well, at this point, he looks up to heaven and he says something. You know, so that's. I mean, I could imagine. You know, we're looking at the book of Acts and we're like, okay, he's talking to these people. They're talking in different languages. But I believe that Messiah was also talking to people in their language, especially when he was interacting with Greek individuals, Babylonian individuals. You know, I think that he was speaking to them. But when he said this word, it was different. I know that the Greek transliterates it, but I think that when he said this statement, it wasn't in the language that the people, you know, understood. There's a lot of different things like that. But yeah, no, that's an interesting thing that you brought up. It's not a Hebrew word by origin. It's an Aramaic word by origin, but it's the transliteration of into Greek, and like a Greek transliteration of it.
Right.
Oh, JP, go ahead, brother.
Just an awesome cross reference for that area. Isaiah chapter 32, starting in verse 1, it says, "Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princesses shall rule in judgment, and a man shall be as an hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. And the eyes of them that see shall not be dim, and the ears of them that hear shall hearken. The heart also of the rash shall understand knowledge, and the tongue of the stammer shall be ready to speak plainly." So that was Isaiah 32, 1-4. But it kind of fit right in perspective of what happened here as far as him giving it says in chapter 7 of the book of Mark, verse 32, it says he was deaf and had an impediment of the speech in his speech. And he says he took him aside, he put his fingers into his ears and spit and touched his tongue. And his tongue was loose and he spake plainly. So it just felt like it fell right in place with that, what was said in Isaiah. There's another one also, just one more, as Isaiah says in 35 verses 5 and 6. It says, "Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as an hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out in streams in the desert." So I just wanted to bring those two. I thought they would they fit perfectly, you know, as far as what happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, a lot of times, this is just one of the things that I noticed. I remember I was having a conversation with Mike, and it was just like how not only are we brainwashed with doctrine, we're also brainwashed with formalism. Formalism is like the expectation of how things need to look. You know, like when you go to these organizations, they have the same. Okay, now we sing the song. Now we take the tithes. Now we do a procession down the aisle. Now we turn around, sit down, and then the person comes up, So, you know, it's like a formalism. You let somebody come out of that form, people go crazy. They don't know what to do next because they're so caught up in the way that they're supposed to do certain things. So you look at Messiah, he takes this person aside. He puts his fingers in his ears, spits on his tongue. Well, it says that he spits and touches his tongue. You know, his fingers is already in his ears. So I'm figuring that he probably spit on his tongue. I don't know. It wouldn't matter, Messiah. But, you know, in my formalist mind, I'm like, why in the world is his fingers in his ears and he's spitting on his tongue? You see what I'm saying? This is just what comes in my mind when I, you know, just being honest. If I saw somebody doing that today, like I would be like, you're insane. And I think that's probably why he pulled him aside. It says in verse 32 that they brought him to him. Verse 33 it says, and he took him aside from the multitude. So he took him aside and brought him out. That's the second time he did that. When he saw the blind man in the book of John, he took him outside the city. The blind man came to him, he took him outside the city away from everybody, and he took a piece of mud and he spit in the mud and he spit in the dirt and made mud and put it on his eyes. But he took him out the city first. So that's just one aspect of why we can't be having these preconceived ways of how things supposed to look and be done. I don't ever hear anybody emphasizing on why he's spitting on his tongue, or why he's spitting and touching his tongue and putting his fingers in his ears. You see what I'm saying? I have no idea why he's doing it either. You know, but at the same time, I'm not gonna perceive him as crazy because I think it's crazy. I hope that you guys understand that. I think it's crazy because I'm used to seeing things a certain way. But I'm not going to perceive the Messiah as crazy because he did something different. And I think that we need to also be prepared to when we see certain things look different, but the fruit is from Scripture. You can't deny even when it looks different. You know, so we need to be ready to get our minds out of formalism. And if we see something different, of course you need to test the fruit. You need to test the fruit. But if the fruit bears witness of this thing that you say is weird, you should not deny that it's from Yah. You know what I mean? And I think that we all have that initial, whoa, what in the world are you doing? But instead, we need to be more patient and be like, hold on, let me see if this is from Yah. Because we think we're not the expositors of everything that's from Yah. So there's things that we don't know. And we need to make sure that we're testing things to see if they bear fruit according to Scripture. You know, just because we never saw somebody put anybody's hand in the ear in Scripture, what happens afterwards? It says in verse 35, right away his ears was opened and the string of his tongue was loosed and he spoke plainly. That's the fruit. So now that you see the fruit, now we need to stop denying what was weird in our eyes. We need to accept it. It doesn't mean that you go around putting your fingers in people's ears. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like, we need to recognize, hey, when something looks weird, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not from Yah. Just because I don't know that it's from Yah doesn't mean it's not from him. I need to make sure. Go ahead, Sister Martha.
Well, in regards to this passage, I think that well, in my opinion, from my own personal experience, this is something that, let's say, for instance, in my family, there's a lot of them that they're not Christian. They don't believe in this way, and they believe in God, but in their own ways. And I know that when God has done miracles in my life, I go crazy and I start telling my family and I start, oh my God, this happened to me and you can't believe this. And they're like, my daughter's going crazy. Or my mother's like, oh my God, something's wrong with her. Oh my God, she's really losing it. And I think it's something similar. the difference is that he's not telling me to be quiet about it. I'm saying it even more. I mean, this happened to me, and look, Mom, and my brothers and my sisters. And it's amazing how, you know, they'll say that about us if we were to testify and say, you know, what the miracles that God has done in our lives. And that's something that I've experienced personally, you know, based on the passage, you know, that God has done so many miracles. And then it's like they say, oh my gosh, she's going crazy, this and that. But then at the same time, they agree, oh my God, God is doing a lot of great things for her in her life. So just want to share that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what's interesting? JP mentioned about him being charged not to say anything. But you know what's interesting is that he pulled him out of the city, away from everybody too. There must have been that, like you said, Sister Martha, like he must have knew if he would have demonstrated this to everybody, they would have said he was crazy. But I think it's a little bit worse when you have a person saying that the Messiah did those things that they say is crazy. You see what I'm saying? It's different when you have a man saying, he put his fingers in my ears and he spit on my tongue and now I can see, you know, and now they're probably like, oh yeah, nah, this man is crazy. You see, it's different than when Messiah does it in front of them and they're all witness. But if he pulls you away from everybody, sometimes it's for you to become a different type of person, you know, for you to become a person of faith, to go out and demonstrate what Yah is doing and his truth and his word and his will and his love and his mercy and all of those things. There was a time where he had when he healed the lepers, he healed 10 lepers, remember? And one of them came back. One of them came back and said, thank you. One of them came back and reverenced him and wanted to follow him, you know? And he was like, how many of you was there? It was 10, and only you came back. You see what I'm saying? So it's like the intent of what he wanted to do was to create an individual that was strong in what he just experienced, rather than professing something that they wasn't ready to profess at that time. You know, I think a lot of times when we professing things according to scripture, we have to also be ready to defend why it's true. You know, we have to be ready to defend the faith, why this is accurate. But sometimes we're so excited, we say stuff, and then they're like, wait, so what happened here? And you're like, I don't know, it happened. And you're like, hey, but what about this? I don't know, but this is what happened. And I think it's more of a faith-based intellect that Yah wants us to present to people. Hey, this is what he did for me, and this is what he wants to do for you. You see, it's more like along those lines, rather than, this is what he did. You know, follow him. But what about this? I don't know, but he did this. I think sometimes that interferes with the true faith that Yah wants to actually put in the people who believe, you know. Go ahead, Sister Martha.
Oh, no. It was by accident. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. No, excellent. But I do understand. I mean, I've done that. Hey, you know, this is, and then I've come into the, you know, people, when you tell people that Yah is true and he did certain things, they're going to want to know a lot. And and the scripture says to be ready to say why you believe, you know. But if we're not ready to say why we believe, when we're publishing these things, a lot of times we do more hurt than you know, help. And this happened a few times. Messiah told a few people not to tell. So I think if he said it, it's for a reason. It's for a reason. And sometimes in our lives, there's things that he does just for us, you know, and it won't affect anybody else. Anybody have anything else to say before we close? I think we just dissected this thing like really well. Go ahead, Brother Mecca.
Yeah, one thing that I was just thinking about, you know, earlier as we were talking about, the Sumerian woman coming to him, for her daughter, or not the Sumerian, the other woman coming, the Syrophoenician, coming for her daughter, and his response to her, and he says, it's not polite to give the children's bread to the dogs, and it reminded me of, a couple things. Number one, we see earlier, as Brian was mentioning, the characteristics of a dog. In Matthew chapter 11, we see him working many miracles for people, and let me see, it was in Capernaum, and a few other places, but we see him working these miracles, and it says that, then in verse 20, in chapter 11 of Matthew, it says, then he began to upbraid the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not, and, he says, woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethsaida, for if the mighty works that were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented a long time ago in sackcloth and ashes. We see, and then we see him also in verse 23. It says, and thou, Capernaum, which are exalted unto heaven, shall be brought down to Sheol. For if the mighty works which were done in thee had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. And so we even see like these Yahudim, or these Israelites that had these mighty works done, kind of referencing back to what Brian was talking about, the Israelites, back then being regarded, the watchers being regarded to as dogs, because, when then you look at the Proverbs where it says, a dog returns to his own vomit. That's exactly what these, Israelites are doing. After the mighty works were being done, they were returning back to their old ways. They were returning back to their old. Go ahead. They were returning back to their old habits and their own ways, and so, we see that, number one. Number two, looking at the bread, Yahusha says, when Hasatan comes to tells him, if you be the son of Elohim, turn these stones into bread. And he says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that came out the mouth of Yah. So seeing that, connecting this to him telling the woman, it's not polite for me to give the children's bread to the dogs. Now, if you think about the bread being the miracles that he's working, or you think about the bread being the faith that he's giving these people, he basically has went from a position to where, he's basically, taking this faith, and instilling it in the people, and he's telling her, like, it's not polite for me to give it to those that are gonna go back, that he probably feels are gonna go back into their old ways.
Right.
It's not polite for me to do that, to give it to those that are going to return to the old ways. And so when she shows her level of faith, he's like, oh, wow, like this is, he's like, okay, this is exactly what it is. So he sees her humbling herself and that she's willing. And so he says, okay, I'm going to give this to you, And then we also see him talk about how, he is the bread of life. Anybody who eats from that bread, let me see. Anybody who, I know it's in John chapter 6, verse 48. He says, I am that bread. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. You know, and then he also talks about in verse 43, he continues to say, "Verily I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up in the last days. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed." Now, and then he says, "He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him." Now, if you think about it, if we're considering his flesh or to be the bread or the faith, we know that all life is in the blood. You know, according to not Leviticus, Genesis, when he's talking to Noah, and Yahuwah telling Noah, you know, do not drink or eat blood. You know, for all life is in the blood. You know, and I've given it to you to make atonement. And so when you look at that aspect, the life walking in Yahusha's footsteps is living the life, is drinking his blood in a way. It's not you actually drinking his blood, but you're walking in those footsteps. You're taking up his life, you know. And so when you do that, exactly. So when you take up the faith that you walk in that faith, and you don't just have the faith, but you also walk in those footsteps. You're literally eating the bread and you're drinking the blood that he has offered to us, which is the faith and the everlasting life. And so, you know, it's just connecting those things, you know, the bread to him, you know, and his blood, like connecting the bread to the faith. Like we see, you know, that you're either going to have two characteristics of people. You're either going to have those that receive the bread, just as the Israelites did, and then they go back to their old ways, you know, or you're going to have those who receive the bread and now choose to walk in, you know, the footsteps, you know, of him, you know, and of that faith. So, you know, I just wanted to point that out.
And you pointing that out made me see a little bit more also of verse. Let's look at Mark 7, right? Verse 27 and 28. What you said and what Sister Martha said is amazing. Like what you said about verse 27, talking about dogs that go back to their old ways, and what Sister Martha said about verse 28, which is the woman humbling herself. Now, what is this? It says, Yahushua said to her, "Let the children first be filled, for it is not acceptable to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs," because of what Mecca said. Because dogs eat and go back to their own vomit. They eat and they throw it up. They eat, they throw it up, they go back, they leave, they go back. And he's saying that that's not what, I'm not trying to give it to those type of people. Now look at what the woman says in verse 28. She first agrees. She said, "Yes, master." And then she says, "But the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." So there's a difference between the dogs and the dogs under the table. There's two different dogs. Like, should I take it and just give it to dogs that's just gonna go around? And she said, "No, yes, master." She said, "Yes, I agree with you. But the dogs that's under the table eat the children's crumbs." She showed that she was not like a regular dog. That she was loyal. She was someone who was waiting, like you mentioned earlier, waiting under the table. That even if the children, you know, drop crumbs, she would eat that. You know what I mean? So I think that it just magnified you. What you said and what Sister Martha said earlier just magnified this even more. That she was agreeing with the idea of what dogs do, but she was saying, using dogs as a metaphor, saying that she was a different type of person. She was not gonna do that. And then that's why Messiah said in verse 29, and he said to her, "Because of this saying, because of what you said, the devil is gone out of your daughter." You know, praise Yah. This elaboration of this chapter just kind of makes me reflect a little bit about my own mentality when dealing with certain things. Like, we ought not to be presumptuous. We ought not to be presumptuous. What I mean by that is like expecting that Yah's supposed to. It's different than expecting that Yah's going to do what he said, but saying in your mind that he's supposed to do for you, rather than you thinking in your mind that you'll wait for him. We wait for our master. We don't suppose that our master's supposed to do anything for us. We serve our master. You see what I'm saying? And this is the mindset that she's presenting. You're right about those dogs. But the dogs that's under the table eat the children's crumbs. You see, that's how they live. They're not outside doing whatever. They're inside under the table with the children. You see what I'm saying? So this just shows us more how the things in our lives, sometimes Yah wants to test the intent of our hearts. Sometimes he allows situations to happen in our life to see if we're going to humble ourselves and wait for him rather than exalting ourselves. Hey, listen, I'm Yahudim. You're going to pay. You're going to be this. Yah's going to get you. Yah, rather than humbling yourself saying, listen, I'm going to wait for whatever Yah wants to give me. It's different. It's a different perspective, a different mindset. It's the Messiah's mindset. This humility that she had, bringing herself down to a dog. Yeah, I wasn't even calling her a dog, but she brought herself down to a dog. When the Messiah's characteristic is that he brought himself from being a king to having no reputation. You see the similarities? You have a person that Messiah is about to die for in order to give her opportunity to be saved. She's lowering herself. The Messiah lowering himself. She's demonstrating not only the faith, but the characteristic of the Ruach. This is just a big lesson for us. Let's not be presumptuous. Let's lower ourselves. When we lower ourselves, Yah said he will exalt us. Messiah made a statement. He says, those who debase themselves, Yah will exalt, and those who exalt themselves, Yah will bring down. You see what I'm saying? This woman brought herself under the Messiah. Went a little bit step further, brought herself under the children that was being fed first. And Yah was like, no, you're going to be fed right now because of what you're saying. Because of what you're saying, you're going to be fed and you're going to have the faith that I'm giving to them. You see, so praise Yah.
Yeah.
Excellent breakdown, brothers and sisters.
If I could add just one more thing, because it had slipped my mind when I was bringing those scriptures out, and they connect to exactly what you were just saying right now. Back to when Hasatan told him, Yahusha, man shall, or Yahusha told Hasatan, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth, of Yah. And we see going back to the Israelites, we see that if we're calling, if we connect the bread to the miracles that he's doing, they grabbed the bread and they took off running, and they didn't, and they didn't repent, and so he upbraided them, and then we see this woman here who's like, look, I'm willing to take whatever you give me. So you're talking about the obedience that she had to say, look, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait for whatever you have to give me. Right. Which means that in addition to the bread, if he's dishing out instructions, she's going to sit there and she's going to take them. And she's going to take them in because she has now said, listen, I'm loyal to my master. I'm loyal to my master, and I'm gonna sit here and take whatever you got to give. So, just praise y'all, man. That's really beautiful. And like you said, we gotta, definitely examine ourselves, during, after reading something like that, definitely.
Yeah, these studies is becoming meditations. Like we need to apply our minds to the mind that's being demonstrated in these chapters, man. These things, that's some crazy humility. You know, there was another account of this story where Messiah was amazed. Messiah was astonished. He was just like, "Oh man." You know, matter of fact, who knows the Matthew? Who knows the Matthew chapter or the Luke, whichever one that coincides with this story? Anybody? No, I'm looking for it. That's why I don't have it. So I'm trying to
You
find
said
it.
Luke?
Yeah, or in any other another account, because I want to, like what JP did earlier, expound it a little bit on the bigger picture of this story. Where was that, JP, that you read earlier in Matthew? I'm pretty sure it's in another gospel too.
I don't think, because I think it was 15. I read Matthew.
The Syrophoenician? Yeah, that's 15. That's why I was
But that,
15 and 17.
right.
No, I'm sorry. No, it's further down.
Yes. Yeah, no, Matthew 15. Matthew 15. Matthew 15. It says, now remember, it says from the children. It says from the children's table. Now we're going to get a little more emphasis. This is Matthew 15, verse 26. 26, it says, but he answered and said, it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs. She said, truth, master. Yet the dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. And he says, so now we're seeing that when he mentions the children, he's not emphasizing on the children themselves, but those who are eating at the master's table. And he says, Yahusha answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it unto you even as you will. So it says, great is your faith. Is there another account? I think is there an account in Luke? If
I
not,
don't think so. I'm not trying that.
Yeah, so she said,
maybe Luke 18? No.
18? No?
Luke 18, I think. And 1? Was that it?
Let me see. Luke 18. No, that's not it.
Okay.
But this is good enough. So he says, "Oh, woman, great is your faith." So the statement that she made in Mark chapter 7, where it says, in verse 29 in Mark 7, where he says, "Because of this saying, go your way." The statement that she made was a statement of faith, like what Emeka was saying. This was a statement of, I'm going to wait for you. Because he said, great is your faith. So because of her belief, she said, I'm going to wait and take whatever that comes from you, the master's table. It says that the children's eat the children's crumbs, but he's emphasizing on the children that's eating at the master's table. You see what I'm saying? So he's like, I'm gonna wait and take whatever comes from you. You're the only one that I want to receive from. And she said, great is your faith. You know what I mean? Just elaborating on that alone shows like we need to be able to not be like, Father, take this situation away and want this exact situation, but say, Father, whatever you do for me, I thank you and I praise you. That's what we're supposed to say. Oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. No, whatever I have, thank you. You know, in Romans chapter 1, it talks about those who did not want to retain the knowledge of Elohim, and it says they didn't want to retain the knowledge, nor were they thankful. Can you complain while you're being thankful at the same time? Can you be thankful and murmur and complain about what you don't have? Can't. Those are two contrary.
Yeah, that'd be called ungrateful.
Right. Those are two contradicting characteristics. I can't be thankful and complaining, or thankful and be worrying about what I don't have. How can I be thankful of what y'all gave me and then worry about what I don't have? If y'all didn't give it to me, I'm not worried about it. Amanda, go ahead, sister.
Well, no, you were asking for other examples about, having faith in it, him changing the situation because of that faith. And I just thought of the one where the woman waited on Yah, and she reached his fringes, and she knew she would be healed, and because of that faith, she was.
Right.
So that was just another example. I don't even remember where it was at, but
I think it was in a few chapters before.
I
think it was in Mark. It was in Mark chapter 5. And no, you're absolutely right, because according to the Torah, she did so much before she was healed. She went through so much, and then she saw a big crowd, and she was just like, I'm not even going to bother him, but I know that if I just touch him, I'm going to be healed. You know what I mean? Like, that humility is ridiculous. Even though Yah is teaching us, hey, be persistent. Like, be annoyingly persistent. That's what it's annoying to people because people don't have the long suffering and the mercy that Yah has. But he's telling you, when it comes to me, come to me diligently all the time, every second, every moment, because that's the same type of attention he's given to you. You know what I mean? But no, absolutely, Amanda. That's an excellent correlation. But yeah, praise Yah. This is probably like a 3-hour study of Mark chapter 7. One chapter. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. All right. Shalom.